let me read for you this timeline. Here's what I think very compellingly, because historiography matters. I won't say more than this. I'll just say the timeline. You react to it. Homosexuality is not new.
Right.
It's as
Of
old
course.
as man. Um, so what is novel is, I'd say, the change agency of this pope and the group of folks that gave us this pope. In 2010, it becomes public for the first time that Bishop Bergoglio has supported very strongly uh, SS civil unions, not just unions, but civil unions. Um, so that's the first time it was ever published, and there's a lot of evidence that he had been a big advocate of it privately before then. 2010 is the first year, right before he became pope, 3 years before. In 2019, in December of 2019, so almost 2020, that's where all this stuff comes from. The German Synodal Way is born. It's initiated with a few goals. Women deacons. We're going to see a new class of women deacons that are not ordained, but more than Joanna and Susanna in the next 10 months or so. They're going to do exactly what they just did.
If he lives that long.
If he lives that long, it's going to happen. The German Synodal Way was initiated in order to bless SS unions and some other things. You're right, he might not live that long. 4 months later, 3.5 months later, after the German Synodal Way is born to do these things, the documentary Francesco comes out, takes the world by storm. Do you guys remember this? Where Francis says, holy cow, he says, we must, on a global scale, legalize SS civil unions. They must have rights.
And by the way, like if I could just say, like that was bad.
No, I
Because
know you. I'm not saying you're like an
yeah,
advocate, or I know
yeah,
you hate that.
yeah.
CT hates this. I hate this. I wonder what Lofton would say, but I'm like, you're not down
Right,
with
yeah.
any of this stuff. I don't think you're down with any of this stuff on this timeline, CT.
Right. No, yeah.
That would be an insult if I said you were. That's why I'm like, I don't know which of these line items you know and which you don't. In March of 2021, exactly a year after Francesco comes out, that's when we're talking about the 21 document that Classical Theist and I keep referring to. That's the month and year. It's a responsum to another dubia. Um, it issues the specifically negative reply to whether church can bless jointly bless SS couples. Then in May of 2021, this is the really interesting part. The German Synodal Way, which is about 1.5 years old, in 80 German cities, it has a mass blessing. This is really important. Has a mass blessing in this spontaneous pastoral blessing that they weren't allowed to do until Francis undid it. Uh,
Wait, you say
of
at mass?
on mass,
Oh, gotcha.
not
Okay,
at.
I get what you're saying. Sorry,
I'm
I
not sure what it was. It was
zoned out
probably
for
on
a
a
second, and then
Saturday.
yeah,
Yeah. No, on mass, like 80
gotcha.
sittings across all of Germany. The German Synodal Way in May of 2021 does this mass blessing for lovers. That's, I think, the best term here is for lovers. Um, okay. Then in September of 2022, uh, Heiner Wilmer, who is very close with Francis, who leads the German Synodal Way, is, according to meeting minutes, a supportive of every single German Synodal Way line item, including what had happened in those 80 cities and the condoning of outright, like, relations between two men, like relations,
Which, to be clear, was not condoned.
which is not in any of these documents saying
Yeah.
that you could just go do that. Yeah, totally. In November, Lidaria, our recently fired Holy Office chief, criticizes Wilmer as head of the German Synodal Way, calling for both what he said in the meeting minutes 2 months before and for the May blessing of across all of Germany. He criticizes them sharply, and he calls for a moratorium on the Synodal Way. And immediately after, in November of 2022, this is only about a year ago now, Wilmer and the German Synodal Way disobey. They say we're not going to um, vanish. Literally, you could go do your own research, people. 2022, end of the year. Uh, the CDF, the doctrinal chief, says you guys have to disappear. You're bad. You have to disband. Now, the very next month, after the doctrinal chief had said, you guys who are trying to do this blessing stuff for gay unions, you have to disband. Francis announces Ladaria's out. You're fired. And he says, I think I'm going to have the German Synodal Way president as my main guy. He's going to take your job. So not only did in November of 2022, Ladaria said, you guys have to disband. They flipped him the bird, the German Synodal Way, led by Heiner Wilmer. But the very next month, it was December 27th or 28th, it's widely reported, reliably reported, that Francis really wants to make Heiner Wilmer give him Ladaria's job. He just disobeyed the man, saying the German Synodal Way doesn't have to do what Rome says. We're going to come up with this permanent synodal council, and we're going to do blessings. We're going to do female deacons, all this stuff. So Wilmer is preliminarily chosen the very next month after he flips the bird to Ladaria. That matters a lot. It goes away over Christmas. Benedict dies. It pops back up in January. And Francis, it's flown as Francis now is reconsidering it. This is his number one choice. This is reported everywhere. Best Catholic reporters that he's going to Wilmer. Then all of a sudden it goes quiet, and we get rumor that cardinals intervened. A lot of people think it's the leftist cardinals that are like, this will be too obvious. But that's reasonable speculation. July through August of 2023, this is very recent now, Fernandez is chosen, I think July 1st, and instead of Bishop Heiner Wilmer, even though he's basically a clone, he's just not as well known, not as associated with the SS Union stuff. In his first week, Tucho says blessings for gay couples are possible, and that the guy he hates that had been punishing him, his old boss, Ladaria, was wrong. On July 10th, the 5 dubia cardinals submit their dubia. On the very next day, July 11th, Francis responds privately, but this would not be published until 2 days before the October Synod. On October the 2nd, that's when it's published. Duca, this is Cardinal Dominic Duca, his dubia, 5e responsum. He asks, can you do these joint blessings that the German Synodal Way wants? And Fernandez, the brand new CDF, christened in time, incarnated in time for the German Synodal Way, insinuates, yes, it can be for one, several, or more joint blessings. In other words, we're going to undo the teaching. And then, of course, December, or whatever it was, 17th, Fiducia Supplicans makes good on that promise to undo the teaching from 21. But so there's a whole history there. You respond to that. I didn't make that stuff up.
No, yeah, I mean, I do agree with the general trajectory of what you're implying there, that it is a concession to the Germans. I do agree with that. But I also don't necessarily, because I don't see it as a reversal the same way that you do, I think it is also sort of a way of trying to rein the Germans in a little bit, so that they don't uh, continue full steam ahead. Of course, they're going to do that anyway. But I see it. I do agree with you about the general trajectory of what you're saying. I think it is a softening, an attempted softening of the church's firm stance on homosexuality generally. I think it actually pertains more to a projection to the wider world, unfortunately, to the secular order. That the church is softer on these issues, that the church is trying to change her entire pastoral stance on homosexuality. Um, I think that those do seem to be like that does seem to be the trajectory here of what they're really trying to accomplish. I think the 2021 document, I think what the 2021 document did what caused for the Vatican is more than just internal church matters. I mean, I think, for example, I don't know if you remember this, and I've spoken about this as well. When the 2021 document came out, the Vatican was in negotiations with the Italian Parliament about some education, some some uh, uh some resistance on part of the Vatican to cooperate with some of the educational um, policies pertaining precisely to these kinds of issues like gender ideology and so on. And so when the 2021 document came out, if I remember the timeline correctly, it did kind of throw a torpedo into those negotiations. And that was another reason why Francis was upset over it. Um, and it kind of did sully a little bit the relationship between the Italian Parliament and the Vatican. Um, and that was also a little bit of an issue there. So I think, but unfortunately, I think that this papacy is very much interested in projecting to the wider world like more of a softer like tone. And that's all for political reasons. That's all for political ambitions, which I think are profane and not becoming of the successor of Saint Peter to be so much interested in clearing up the church's image so that she can be more widely accepted by the secular order. I think that's what this is really ultimately about is signaling to the world a softening of the church's stances on these sexual issues, which I think is the heart of the scandal, and I think that's the heart of the problem. And I think that's sort of that seems to me to be why we can't be triumphalistic anymore. Like that is why is because regardless of how we analyze these magisterial texts, you and I have different ways of doing that, and that's okay, I think. We arrive sort of at the same general conclusion about why this is terrible and then why uh, the church's uh, or why like this pontificate's approach to these issues, pastoral approach to these issues, is just going to lead to a continual loss of moral credibility for the church in terms of her authority uh, being perceived by the wider world. Like the world is not going to see the church as a credible moral authority if she keeps softening her pastoral stances ad infinitum, seemingly, right? And that's the crisis to me. To me, it's really a crisis of credibility, moral credibility for the church to be this, because we used to pride ourselves like back in like I mean, I wasn't really around so much for this, but I know James White, for example, loves talking about the 90s and all the debates he had in the 90s, right? And our Catholic apologists would be like, the church has been solid, contraception, homosexuality, divorce and remarriage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and we pride ourselves on the church's firmness on those issues. And the church's firmness on those issues was specifically what invited a lot of other Protestants to come into the fold, a lot of Anglicans, right?
Exactly.
And we
Exactly.
don't have that, we can't brag about that anymore. We just can't. And while we disagree about like the interpretation of this document in particular, we are on the same page on the trajectory of this document and the consequences of this document. And the crisis of legitimacy that we're kind of in. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but I just wanted to kind of concede as much there.